Blacksmith. The blacksmith was essential in every village and town. Their forge produced tools for farming, iron fittings for buildings, horseshoes for transport, and basic weaponry for local defence. Apprenticeships typically began around age 12 to 14 and lasted for around 7 years, during which the apprentice learned to manage the fire, shape metal, and repair worn tools. They laboured in intense heat, hammering iron on the anvil for long stretches, and were often covered in soot by the day's end. Despite the harsh conditions, they held a secure social position. Everyone from peasants to lords relied on their skill, and a master blacksmith could expect steady income through both crafting and repairs. In some communities, the smith was among the most respected tradesmen, as almost no aspect of medieval life functioned without tools forged in the local smithy. Armourers. Armourers occupied the specialist, high-status end of metalworking. Unlike general blacksmiths, they focused on creating protective equipment. First mail shirts and coifs, and later the complex steel plate armour worn by knights and wealthy men-at-arms. Training was exceptionally long. Only the most skilled apprentices were accepted, and it could take more than a decade before a craftsman was competent enough to work independently. Their daily work required a lot of precision. Armourers shaped individual plates, articulated joints, and fitted armour to the measurements of the customer. Mistakes in alignment or thickness could mean failure on the battlefield. Because armour was expensive, sometimes costing as much as a small estate, successful master armourers earned high wages and enjoyed considerable prestige. Cobblers and shoemakers produced the footwear worn by every level of medieval society. Their work involved cutting leather, shaping soles, and stitching boots and shoes by hand. Apprenticeships generally lasted about 7 years, and the skills acquired allowed a craftsman to work almost anywhere, as demand for repairs and new shoes was constant. Life in the workshop was steady but modest. A cobbler spent much of the day seated at a bench, working with awls, knives, and waxed thread. Most earned a reliable income repairing worn footwear, which was more common than producing new pairs. Although cobblers were not wealthy, they were valued for providing something few households could make themselves. Their trade offered stability, and even in difficult economic times, people still needed shoes. Bakers. Bakers were responsible for producing one of the staple foods of medieval life, bread. In towns, they operated under strict regulation, as laws such as the assize of bread and ale set both quality and price. Their day began long before dawn. Bakers rose in darkness to light the ovens, knead dough, and prepare loaves for a population that depended on them daily. Apprenticeships could be shorter than in many crafts, often 3 to 5 years, reflecting the constant need for trained bakers. Their work was physically intense. A baker spent hours near the heat of the oven, lifting heavy dough and working through crowded mornings as townspeople queued for bread. Income was steady but rarely high due to controlled prices. However, a successful master baker who operated multiple ovens or supplied institutions such as monasteries or garrisons could build a comfortable living. Bakers occupied a respected place in the community. Weavers. Weavers formed the foundation of the medieval textile industry, one of the largest economic forces in Europe. Most weavers worked with wool or flax, depending on the region, and their products ranged from coarse everyday cloth to the finer fabrics traded across long distances. Training usually began in early adolescence. Boys entered apprenticeships that lasted 5 to 9 years, learning fibre preparation, loom maintenance, and the strict quality standards enforced by guilds. Working life was demanding. A weaver spent long hours seated at the loom, pushing the shuttle and beating the threads into place. This labour was repetitive and physically tiring. Journeymen earned modest wages, and while few became wealthy, skilled weavers enjoyed steady employment in towns where the textile trade dominated the local economy. Their work clothed nearly everyone, from peasants to merchants, making them an important part of medieval society. Tanners. Tanners carried out one of the most necessary and least pleasant trades of the medieval world, transforming animal hides into usable leather. Their work involved soaking skins in solutions of lime, water, and sometimes urine, followed by scraping and further treatment. Training was long and physically demanding, often taking up to 7 years. Because of the strong odours and waste produced by the trade, tanneries were usually located outside city walls or along rivers downstream from populated areas. Tanners often held lower social status because of the nature of their work. yet leather was essential for countless goods: shoes, belts, armor fittings, straps, and book bindings, for example. A successful master tanner who owned his vats could earn solid income despite the trade's reputation, supplying raw material to shoemakers, armourers, and many other craftsmen. Carpenters. Carpenters were responsible for much of the physical construction of medieval life. For example, they built timber-framed houses, barns, bridges, carts, and ships, and played a major role in military engineering through the construction of siege engines and defensive works. Apprenticeships lasted around 7 years, during which the apprentice learned joinery, timber selection, and the use of specialised tools. Their work varied widely. Some carpenters laboured outdoors on large structures, while others specialised in fine interior work or furniture. Skilled carpenters were highly valued and often contracted by guilds, town councils, monasteries, or nobles. Their income was generally higher than many other trades, reflecting the technical skill required and the importance of their work in expanding towns and rebuilding after war or fire. Apothecary. The apothecary served as both merchant and early medieval practitioner, supplying herbs, spices, salves, and remedies. Unlike craft guilds, their training was less standardized. Many learned through long periods of study under an experienced master, acquiring knowledge of botany, ingredients, and the trade networks that brought exotic spices into Europe. Apothecaries worked indoors, surrounded by shelves of jars and scales. Their day involved grinding ingredients, preparing mixtures, and advising customers on treatments for common illnesses. Because many of their goods were expensive imports, apothecaries operated high-margin businesses and often achieved notable social status. They were educated figures within the community, respected for their knowledge and relied upon especially in areas without physicians. That's all for this video. If you enjoyed it, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.